House of the Dragon Season 2 is a strange sequence of episodes. I've seen a wide variety of opinions on the internet, as tends to be the case, but largely a lot of people seem to come away with it on the slightly more negative side, I think in large part because of the pacing. This season kind of peaks just before its halfway point, and that leads to people having the impression that, oh, these slightly slower second half episodes are more of what the entire season was. With that said, I think there is one specific episode in season two that really doesn't get enough credit. I have seen it widely hailed as one of the better episodes of season two, but I think it is honestly the best episode of House of the Dragon, full stop. I like it more than Lord of the Ties. Why is that? Well, that episode has an incredibly well crafted plot and is really moving. It's still one main driving plot at its core. I feel like Rhaenyra the Cruel, the second episode of House of the Dragon's second season, more embodies the strengths of the Song of Ice and Fire books. That it has numerous interweaving plots, each of which is incredible on its own, all interacting and shifting the position of pieces on the board. It's rad, and it's the feeling that I want from any Game of Thrones show. So today I thought it'd be fun to go through this episode, kind of analyze it, and give my thoughts on some of the better points there. And yeah, I figured it'd be an interesting kind of new format to go into. I hope people like it. Let me know if you do. I haven't really done like a single episode breakdown like this, but it's worth it for Rhaenyra the Cruel. It's also worth noting that I'm coming from a place of ethos here, insofar as George R. R. Martin is on record as loving this episode on his blog, which is quite unique from some of his now deleted butterfly related opinions on the earlier episodes of the season. It is interesting. Blood and Cheese is the main point of his very critical blog post that he did delete, but the aftermath of Blood and Cheese he really didn't seem to mind, and in fact, really seemed to enjoy based on comments on his blog. So, it goes to show that this episode is pretty great. The opening sequence does such a great job of setting the tone and establishing this horrific event that has just occurred. This haunting music that's amazing, as all music on this show is, just kind of drifting through the corridors as we begin to see chaos erupt in the Red Keep, as we've never really seen before. These bloody sheets are immediately the first thing we see, and they're very evocative of this child that has just been killed. And I think that it really speaks to how strong the aftermath of this event is, as that is pretty much the entirety of this episode, is the aftermath of Blood and Cheese. I think the main issue there is that this episode is from the point of view of the victims of Blood and Cheese, pretty much, the people who were negatively affected by it. That being Aegon and his camp, specifically suffering from the death of this child, and then Rhaenyra with the kind of death of her positive reputation thanks to Daemon's meddling. I think that the previous episode in the actual Blood and Cheese sequence was a bit too tied to the actual perpetrators of those events to actually pull off this degree of pathos it has in the book. We then get a bunch of kind of intercut scenes of characters reacting to this event, specifically intercut with this first silent sequence. We have Aegon having a fairly valid temper tantrum in his room. Him destroying his father's model of the old empire isn't one of the show's more subtle metaphors. And it's on again in his conversation unending Otto as he's kind of undoing his father's legacy through some means, at least according to Otto. The word villain is used a bunch in this episode, most notably by Aegon here and then again in the Small Council. And it really ties into the title and the idea of being perceived as evil, which is the main kind of core of the theme going on here, which is not just for 8th grade book reports, contrary to popular belief. It really makes you appreciate the episode title more, and I probably would bump it up a tier or two because of that in retrospect. What did you think of this episode and season? Did you really like it? Did you not like it as much as I did? I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. While you're down there, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I think only about a third of my audience is subscribed, so anything to help grow the channel is really appreciated. Back to the video. We then go to Otto and Alicent discussing the ramifications. Alicent is understandably very, very sad, and Olivia Cook's performance this episode is incredible as she is just weeping in this scene. Otto is kind of the opposite of that. He says, "Some good may yet come of this," and that's so emblematic of him as a character, it could pretty much be Otto's catchphrase. I think this episode is Otto at his most Machiavellian and calculated, and simultaneously later on at his most human. If this is anyone's episode specifically, despite the title, it's his. I think the title actually goes to that even further, as Rhaenyra the Cruel, we know, doesn't necessarily refer to Rhaenyra, at least at this point in the story. She does barbecue a bunch of people later this season, but it is Otto's label, so it is kind of reflecting that it is Otto's time to shine. We then move into the council meeting, which is also super fun. Tom Glencarney kills it this episode and every episode, but I think that this is my favorite performance of his throughout the entire season. He goes through the range of emotions that are associated with grief and then kind of settles back into his normal self, but a bit darker by the end of the episode. That not to say that he's not that dark to begin with, but he is also just a great presence throughout this episode, continuing his temper tantrum into the council chamber. I also think that the focus on Otto in this episode is kind of what was missing from season 1, episode 9, The Green Council. I feel like there it was just kind of too split focused. It was kind of mostly focused on Alicent, but they could have either focused on her more or less. Either way, I think would have been better than what ended up happening. I really enjoy just this continual through line of Aegon spiraling and blaming anyone he talks to. And I really enjoy that Larys and Aegon's relationship is kind of established here. It's one of the best parts of the back half of the season for me, and it has its roots in this council scene. Larys is the only person there who Aegon finds to actually be useful in this moment, as he's located one of the perpetrators, Blood, and offers him to Aegon to kill. I love the way the scene shifts as Otto starts laying out the plan to blame Rhaenyra. All parties involved go from standing around the room to actually sitting at the table in their places with their balls in their little ball holders. It really reminds me of a great video by a channel called Dream Dimension Productions on a scene from Mad Men, which I'd recommend you check out, but that's really well applied here too, with just a change in blocking to establish a change in tone in the scene as we go from the personal tragedy to the political opportunism. I love the way that Otto ends up pitching this scheme to Aegon, kind of like it's a pyramid scheme. Act now to double your strength and ruin your enemy. It's great, and I could see why he would think that Aegon would join a pyramid scheme. I think Helena's presence is great this episode, as she is a bit more present in the moment due to this recent trauma, while still being just so crushed by these burdens of her duties as a queen. We see her initially protesting, going on this parade, but she very much has to because it is going to help them win the war, supposedly. This very much is kind of more book Helena than show Helena, it seems. The performance is fantastic, but the show leans more into Helena's kind of inhuman prophecy elements, whereas the book, she's just kind of completely shattered from the death of her child, and that results in her pretty much doing nothing for the rest of the war. So I think kind of walking a line between those two extremes is the ideal, and I hope that's what they do with her in season 3. One of very few gripes that I have with this episode is I do feel like the aforementioned parade scene with Jaehaerys' stitched-on head goes on for about a minute too long. But I do appreciate that that's done to heighten the feeling of Helena's discomfort for the viewer. I also like that it's intercut with Blood's interrogation and death, though I feel like Aegon probably should have thrown up after killing a dude for the first time. It would make sense for his character and to just kind of tie into the fact that, like, yeah, he's seeking vengeance, but it's still gross and he's not really prepared for it. Also, sidebar, the way Blood talks reminds me a lot of Grog from Critical Role, which is points in my book. We then head over to Dragonstone for the first time this episode, and Rhaenyra's small council scene is actually pretty good in contrast to the rest of the season, largely because of the presence of Rhaenys and Daemon, and because it's not super repetitive yet at this point. The main purpose of this scene is to show Rhaenyra's emotions in response to Jaehaerys' death, her outrage, her confusion, and it's mostly set up for the next scene, which is amazing. Daemon and Rhaenyra's argument is outright phenomenal, and the cinematography therein feels like Succession to me, and I mean that as the highest possible praise that I can give. The camera's kind of handheld in places, and it's fantastic. I'm not a cinematographer, but it's pretty to watch, and I like it. Damon's flaws here are clearly shown to both the viewer and Rhaenyra. He is so annoying with his half denials and technicalities on why he didn't technically order this child to be killed. I also love the through line of both Daemon and Aegon being children who throw glasses and platters around when they're a little grumpy. I think this argument is one of Emma Darcy's best scenes this season. They're absolutely fantastic. Also, one of my favorite quotes from this entire season, and I'd say this entire show, comes from this scene. It is just, oh my god. To quote from this episode, I think you used my words as an excuse to take your own revenge, to indulge the darkness you keep sheathed within you like a blade. That's just so Martin, and I love it with all my heart. I think Damon's characterization here is really strong, but I will say it is a little bit inconsistent consistent with where he ended the first season in crowning Rhaenyra. I think ideally these seasons would have been written closer together and they'd be able to weave things in a little bit more smoothly, but overall I think it still very much works with the larger kind of broad strokes of his motivation. I'm glad that Bela also had a chance to be on screen with her father, however briefly, even if they didn't get to exchange words, and I hope they'll actually get a chance to in future seasons. This then is followed by a couple of silent scenes of Viserys' various children reflecting, Aegon and Helena passing each other in the halls of the Red Keep, but not knowing how to comfort each other, and Rhaenyra playing with her children. This then leads into Alicent having a brief interaction with Kristen, and immediately Lady Macbething and absolving herself through cleansing in a bath. She feels as though this incident is her fault, all of them do, and the gods are punishing her from her indulgences with Kristen. Sir Criston Cole feels similarly, but for reasons more pragmatic than religious. He should have been there to protect the Queen instead of getting with her mother at the time of the assassination. There's also a good little scene of him watching the nursery being cleaned up, and it really sets the stage for his confrontation with Eric. Criston projecting his stained honor onto the stained cloak of his subordinate until that subordinate's literal death is just incredible. It's great characterization for Criston, and it's kind of just hilarious. It does a great job of showing how unwilling this Lord Commander is to reflect on his own mistakes at this point in the story. And I think it's a good character choice for someone who does come off as very short-sighted in the source material. I also think that Criston has some really insane, crazy eyes during this sequence, which are really fun to see. I really like Fabian Frankel's acting. Don't send him death threats, people. It's a bad idea. Don't do that. That's mean. We then arrive at a portion of the episode that I call, quote unquote, the interludes. I shouldn't have read those quotes from my script. I think it's really enjoyable, and it's essentially 7 quick scenes, each of which are disconnected from the rest of the episode, at least so directly, and each of which features characters reflecting on recent events. It's a great way to further establish dynamics, especially new ones, and deepen characterization therein. I'm going to try to semi-rapid fire through them here. First off, we have Jason Bela's crossbow training. It's good to have more scenes between these betrothed and of Bela in general, and I really like that they're directly discussing Jace's true father here. It shows the level of trust that these two have already established. It does really sadden me that this is the most that Laenor and Harren are really brought up this season, but I'll take what I can get at this stage. Second up, we have Aemon's brothel visit. I have less to say here, but it's a good way to show that this is an individual who projects callousness, but is at a vulnerable point. We get to see him being happy that Daemon knows him enough to want to kill him, but openly expressing regret in regard to killing his nephew. I thought that this would be the case in the kind of lead up to the season, and I only wish we got a little bit more of it. This prostitute, who's named Sylvie, also warns against the warring of princes causing others to suffer, which ties her motivations for helping other peasants in the revolts later in the season quite well into the plots that are currently going on and her involvement with Aemon. Third, we have Hugh, Cat, and their daughter. There's not a ton to say about this one. I love the show characterizing Hugh in such a way, but this scene mostly serves to establish his character and the broader situation in King's Landing. Fourth up is bro time with the Super Hull brothers. It's great to meet Adam, and I think their dynamic is fantastic. It mostly establishes who they are and what they want. Fifth up is some post-nut clarity with Corlys and Rhaenys. This is the best scene in the season for these two in my eyes, which saddens me. Corlys is confirmed as a bottom based on that line about enjoying Rhaenys commanding him, but they're such a believable couple dynamic, and I just love every scene we have of them. I just wish we had more of it this season. I blame the lack of rewrites for not giving us more of that. Sixth, Rhaenyra and Massaria in a scene that did not tank the IMDb rating of this episode. It's our first time in the Library of Scrolls where both of these characters will end the season. I don't have a ton to say on this one, but overall I like it, and the relationship between these women, both of whom are initially bonding over their repeated kind of getting screwed over by Daemon, really leads to a point of commonality that definitely makes Rhaenyra's trust in Massaria more believable, given her thoughts in this episode in the immediate aftermath of her fight with Daemon. Last up is our shortest interlude, that being sea smoke beginning to circle around Adam. I love the music here, and it's a great way to start to subtly establish the connection between this dragon and this rider. At the end of the interludes, tying back into the main plots of the episode, we find the introduction to one of my favorite characters of the season, Ulf. I've always loved that the first thing we see him do is casually steal an onion. It both establishes his morals and opportunism, and it being an onion evokes a certain smell for the character, and the thought that he may have layers. It's an organic way to show Aegon's Ratcatcher massacre as well, from the perspective of the common people that Otto is so worried about. It's also a tiny note, but I really enjoy that they did catch cheese, but didn't know that it was him. It fits into the source material quite comfortably, and it does make me feel very bad for Cheese Dog, which I think is the main theme of the season. This leads into what I believe is the best scene of the season. This sparring conversation between the king and his grandfather, the Hand, is outright incredible. Out the gate, I want to compliment the blocking of this scene, which is kind of minutia, but it's great. It's shot so dynamically, and the characters all move around in a way that very organically reflects the state of their conversation. Reese Ifans deserving an Emmy for this episode is not a rare opinion. Shout out to that slow head turn he does before asking Kristen what he's done. But I also think that Tom Glencarney does a fantastic job in this scene. He's hilarious and incredibly believable as this vacillating monarch who's looking for easy solutions. "I wish to spill blood, not ink," is a really iconic quote from the source material that's delivered quite well here. I think he does a fantastic job overall, and he is walking that line between just not taking it seriously and actually being believably hurt when his grandfather starts just outright shitting on him. Otto's outrage might seem strange at first glance, but as soon as he starts talking about the rat catchers being hanged for all to see, the full picture slots into place. There's not really any room for sympathy in Otto anymore. In this scene, we see far more incensed grief for his PR strategy than he ever dedicated to his great grandson, which tracks with the character incredibly well. That thought of spinning perception even pervades what Otto does during this conversation, closing the doors when he starts really laying into Aegon and his failings as a leader. The most interesting part of Otto in this conversation to me is his reflection on Viserys. He's very clearly remembering how easy it was to manipulate the former king, but there is a layer of true sadness and emotion below all of it that really isn't normally displayed by Lord Hightower. It makes me wonder a little bit about the personal dimension of their relationship, if indeed there was one. Viserys was a social guy, and maybe him and Otto were pals outside of work. I could see it. I also love Otto's little cackle, followed by spitting out, "Is that what you think?" I think it's my favorite line read of the season, and I don't have anything else to say on that. It's just great.
You never think of your father, his forbearance, his judiciousness, his big cock.
And of course, this scene ends with Aegon removing Otto as Hand of the King, showing just how much Otto misread his ability to manipulate his grandson. Kristen Cole is subsequently awarded an entirely unwanted and undeserved promotion that definitely won't go horribly and give him PTSD. Skipping ahead a little bit, I do want to talk a little bit about the final scene of the season between Otto and Alicent, which is also fantastic. It's so interesting to see them in unison for once after all of this squabbling up until this point, especially in the Green Council. They're politically aligned now, but they're still not personally aligned. Otto can probably tell what her sin is that she wants to confess. He did clock her and Kristen coming into the council at the same time last episode, but he just really does not need to hear that shit right now, which is kind of understandable. With that said, as I said, politically they are still aligned as the voice of reason, the moderates on Aegon's council, though Otto is now dismissed and Alicent is left to stand alone as a voice of reason. Otto then departs the capital, which is a massive change from the source material, and it's one that I quite enjoy. We see him in a prison cell at the very end of the season, and it's unclear exactly where he's going. If I had to guess, he'll join his other grandson, Daemon, at the end of this season and beginning of next season. If I had to guess who has him in prison, the Beesberries would make sense. As we know, he's traveling to the Reach, they are in the Reach, and they'd likely be upset for the death of their previous lord, Lyman Beesbury, who was killed by Kristen Cole. We then turn our gaze towards Cargill Bowl, which is obviously great. I've seen some people take issue with Massaria spotting the imposter and warning Eric about it, but honestly I think it works quite well, much better than the alternative of him just happening to stumble into his intruder brother or into the room where his queen is about to be assassinated. Maybe Eric just enters every room shouting "brother" and holding his sword aloft. I think this is a great way to firmly place Rhaenyra in Massaria's debt and accelerate the role the White Worm has to play in the story. I love the way that the camera feels like it's following the intruder throughout this sequence, to the point that it almost feels like a Metal Gear Solid game. It's rad. They did this in the previous episode with Blood and Cheese, but I think this works a lot better here, as I think that both Cargills are framed more as sympathetic, and we can kind of track with them a lot better. I also love the behind-the-scenes detail. The production went to great lengths to ensure that both twins received the same injuries throughout the fight, making it truly impossible for both the viewers and the characters to tell them apart. The call and response of "we were born together and you parted us" gives me chills every time I watch the episode. Martin loves including twins in his stories, and this is exactly why. There's no greater externalization of the human heart in conflict with itself than two identical people forced into conflict by their choices and by their paths. The way this sequence ends is incredibly powerful. In the book, the surviving cardinal simply succumbs to his wounds a few days later. Here, he's unable to live in a world where he has slain his brother, for no man is as accursed as a kinslayer. The only thing that I don't hyper love about this episode is its ending. Alicent and Cole reverting to their affair in the wake of all this traumatic shit going on makes sense, but it's not that striking of a conclusion to such an excellent episode. I feel like ending on Otto's departure of the city, perhaps riding away through the rain as he did at the end of Season 1, Episode 5, could have worked better. Regardless of that, Rhaenyra the Cruel remains far and away my favorite episode of House of the Dragon so far. It is a tightly knit package, scripted and acted and blocked to perfection, and I could watch it 20 more times this week and I would be happy. Let me know what you think of it. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. As I mentioned, this is my first time doing a format like this, so if you enjoyed, I'd love to hear that, and if I should do more of them, I'd love to hear what episodes you'd like to see me cover. I would talk about A Song of Ice and Fire, House of the Dragon, and Game of Thrones a ton, so if you enjoy any or all of those things, subscribe, like the video, comment, all that typical YouTube algorithm stuff. That really helps me out and is free for you to do. I really appreciate it, and as I said, it helps grow the channel a lot. I will stop yapping. Thank you all for watching. Toodles.